Next portion here, we're going to start looking at the layout and how that's going to go onto the perf board. So our board, we're going to use our template. If you'll remember back from maybe when you worked on the remote jammer, we're going to be using that perf board to house all of our parts. So that's the blue thing that you see down here. So this is our little template that we'll go ahead and use. And the schematic diagram then that shows where how everything's connected is right here. And we're going to just kind of focus in on these parts right here. So these are the transistors that are responsible for activating each of the layers, and the resistors are connected directly to the transistor, so they'll be close by. So if I were to take a peek at this one, which is already assembled, I have these 4 transistors, and what they do when they turn on is basically they make the whole layer negative layer, the negatives of the layer connect to negative. So when this turns on, all of the negatives on this layer are connected to negative. And then when it turns off, they're disconnected from negative. Okay, so what happens if I activate this lower layer here by turning the transistor on? That means that all of the negatives on the layer are connected to negative. So if I were to make any one of the ends of these resistor a positive, it'll turn on the corresponding LED in that layer. So in order for an LED to light, the layer has to be connected to negative, and we have to have a high or a positive on whichever resistor that corresponds to the LED that we want to light up. Now, another little thing to know, each of the transistors is responsible for a layer, but only one layer will be activated. I guess that's not entirely true. If we were to activate and turn on all of these transistors at the same time, if I made, say, this pin positive right here, and all of these transistors were on, well, that would mean that all the layers would be connected to negative. And so if I made this pin positive, that would mean that this LED, this one, and this one would all be turned on. Why? Well, because a positive or a high would be connected to this, to this, to this, to this. And the negatives for each of those LEDs are connected to each of the layers, and all layers would be on. So therefore, every light in that column would be on. Okay. Maybe I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves, but these are just the transistors and those 1 kilo ohm resistors that we're going to be focusing in on right now. And as you could see from what I just had, we had those kind of off to the side of the board so that we had some room for putting the cube on there. Okay, so in looking at the top layer of our board, what we're going to do is we're just going to put the transistors somewhere over in this area right here, and that'll leave us a lot of room for us to put the cube down into this area right here. Okay, so step 1 is let's just find a home for the parts. So I have a total of 4 transistors. I'm going to put the first one, I'm just kind of arbitrarily choosing these spots, and it'll be similar. I'm going to choose this one. This one, I'm going to say that I'm going to use this one for the top layer. Okay, and then we're going to have a transistor according to this one. Let's see, this one's the top layer here, right? Fourth layer, as I have it called here. So we'll designate this one for the top. And you can see then that I have the 1 kilo ohm resistor connected directly to the base of that transistor. So remember, base is the middle, okay? And this one would be the E or the emitter, and it goes base and collector. This transistor type, if you don't remember, it's an NPN. I don't know if we covered that or not, but the diagram shows that it's an NPN. And we're going to be using a 2N3904. Just in case you're wondering. Okay, so it's emitter, base, collector. Okay, and now we need to have a transistor that connects up to the base. And I'm going to be consistent with what I showed some other people here. So I'm going to have one end of the resistor go here, and then 5 squares down the road. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to put another end there. Maybe that's too far. Oh, that's too far apart. I apologize. Let's do it this way. So they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 5 circles. So there's 3 in between. Okay. So we're going to have a resistor right here. This is going to be our 1K ohm. Okay. And one leg's going to go into this hole. The other leg's going to go into that hole. Okay. So first one's placed. Now we need to find a spot for the next transistor. I think I'm just going to go here. And again, this is E, B, and C. And then I'm going to put the resistor right here. I'll put one leg right into this hole, the other leg into this hole right here. This is a 1K. And then again, next transistor, we'll put one here. E, B, C. And we'll put its resistor right here. One leg there, one leg there. And let's get our last transistor in here. E, B, C, and the resistor for it right here. With one leg there and one leg there. Okay, so there's my layout. Now, if I were to go to the bottom of the board, we're going to need to see how the parts actually are going to connect. So what you could do to start is to put these parts in these exact locations. You could pay attention to the numbers that are on here and, you know, count the holes to get them where they need to go. And then we'll flip the board over and we'll show how we go ahead and connect them. Now, do not cut any of the legs off of these parts yet. We're just going to hold on that because we might be able to bend them and use them to connect to where they need to go. Now with our parts kind of placed in here, at least a few of the parts that we have here, what we're going to do now is flip it over so that we can show how things are going to get wired on the bottom side of the board. So if I were to flip the board over and take a look at that, you would see that the legs from all of the parts that we just positioned in are coming through all of the places where I have stuff written down. So here's the first transistor coming through, the one that we placed here. And then you'll notice here, just pay attention, look where the base is. You'll see that if I go 2 up, you'll see a lead coming through. And then 5 spaces over, you'll see another lead. So looking right here, here's the base. 2 up, there's one of the resistors. And 5 over, there's that other leg. So transistor for the top, resistor that belongs to that resistor for the top. And what I mean by that is looking back here, here's this transistor. This is the one that's going to control the top or the 4th layer. We have this resistor, but we have the 1 kilo ohm resistor that's connected to the base, right? And then the other end of that resistor is going to connect to A3 of the Arduino. Okay, so we have basically a transistor and then a resistor that belongs to it. Transistor, resistor that belongs to it, and so on and so forth. So for the board, when we flip it, we have our transistor, and then above it, we'll have the resistor that belongs to that transistor. Okay, transistor, the resistor that belongs to it. Transistor, resistor that belongs to it, and transistor, resistor that belongs to it. So each end of that resistor is connected to the base. So really what I can do is I'll show you when we actually do it, but we'll just bend the leg of the resistor or the transistor over, whatever, just so that these two connect. Okay, and then we'll do the same. So we'll be connecting the base of the next transistor to the base of the resistor that belongs to it. Same here, transistor, resistor that it belongs to, transistor, resistor that it belongs to. Okay. All right. Now, if we look back at the schematic, we'll take this one, which is the top one, which is this transistor and resistor pair here. We'll notice that the other end of the resistor connects to A3. And then if we were to jump up here, this end of the resistor will connect to A2, this end to A1, and this end of this resistor to A0. So this A3, this resistor here, this end needs to go to A3. Well, A3 is way over here. So what we'll do is we're going to use a jump wire, and we're going to actually, use some wires like this, some really thin wire. It's 30 gauge wire, and we'll use that to connect from point to point. It's going to make it a little bit easier. So I'm just going to kind of lightly draw this. We're going to take a wire and we're just going to solder it right onto that pad where this end of the resistor is. And we're going to bring that all the way over to right here where A3 is, into that hole. And this one's going to be A2, and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to take a wire and bring that to A2. We're going to solder another wire right onto here, which this is A1, and we'll bring it over to A1. And this last one here is going to be going to A0, which we'll bring over and solder to A0. Okay. All right, so this would be the point that you can work on getting to today, and I'm going to stop the video with this. So you can solder in the 4 transistors, the 4 1K ohm resistors, flip the board over, connect each resistor to its corresponding transistor, and then take the jumper wires and connect A3 to A3, or this end of the resistor goes to A2, A1, and this end to A0. And I will do a demo video of this next. All right, I want to get the parts placed that we did on our layout here into the Perfboard so that I can get them soldered in. My goal is to get the 4 transistors, these 4 resistors, and then the jumper wires in. So everything that we've already planned out. So the transistors we're using, these are 2N3904s, which are NPN transistors. Look carefully, you should, pay attention to the numbers on the board. You'll want to make it the same as your plan, that you don't get messed up as you're going through things. And so let me start by getting the first part in. I'm going to put the transistors in, then I'll solder. Okay, so this first one here, I could see it was in row 5, and then there was 2 empty spaces, and then I had the collector, which is on the right, base in the middle, emitters on the left. Okay, so I'll push that down. Remember, they don't get pushed down all the way, just push them down till they're comfortable, and then just bend those legs just a little bit, but not all the way over. Okay, grab the next one, and then just for reference, notice there should be 2 rows and then the transistor legs. So let's get these bent a little bit first. So we're going to skip 1, 2, and this will end up being in column 8. Get it pushed down, bend those legs over a little bit. Next one, again, we're going to be skipping 2 rows, so this is going to be in column 11. Okay. Oops. Okay. And, just pay attention to what you're doing. In each case so far, I have 2 holes, or 2 spaces here, and I'm in the correct row. I'm in row 11 right now. Get that pushed down, bend those over just a touch. And the fourth one. Fourth one's in 14. Okay. Double check to make sure that you have them in the right spot. And then what we can do is go ahead and solder those in. I like to make sure that I have it taped down just like we've done for everything. All right, solder. Take your time. Just want the solder to be on the pad of the part that we're soldering. And remember, at this point, we're not going to cut the legs off quite yet. Wipe your tip off every now and then. Okay. We got the 4 transistors in there. And then what we want to do is get our 4 resistors, the 1 kilo ohms. So these. All right. So they may this paper, and if that's the case, you can just pull them out of there. Okay, these are the 1000, so the bands on them would be brown, black, red, and gold. And looking at where each of the resistors go, we'll start with this one here. So 2 holes up from the base is where it's going to go. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 over will be the other one. Oops. So I'll start by just kind of getting these bent. And see, this would be the first hole and the second hole right there. So this is actually in row 7. And then I just want to put the other one so that there's a total of 3 spaces in between, right? So 1, 2, 3 spaces. So leg, space, 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 other leg. All right, let's get that pushed down in there. And I'm just going to bend them over just a little bit. And then I'm going to just put all 4 in there. So next one, just pay close attention. You go in very much the same pattern as we've been following. So this next one I'm in, go up from that base, which is right here. I'm going to go up 2, put it in this hole, which is in row 10. Make sure there's 3 in between, and then put the other leg right there. And then just bend that over, or bend the legs of that part over just a touch, so it doesn't fall out on you. Next one, this is in 13, I believe. And then this one is going to be in 16 right there. Skip 1, 2, 3 in the middle, and last leg goes down. Okay. All right, now I'm going to solder this in, and I can kind of keep in mind next of where those legs need to go to. Let's see if I can get a little closer. Okay, let's get it focused. All right, let's see what we can do. Let me solder the leg here. Oops, it's not working as good as I want it to. Let me get this thing taped down. There we go. Okay. So solder it in. Solder this leg. I'm going to solder these legs because I can then cut them and get them out of the way, because I got a lot of stuff going on here. Okay, so these 4 legs right here, right, are these 4 legs right here that I just soldered in these ends of the resistors. I'm going to snip the legs off on just those legs right here. All right. Now the other, I think what I'm going to do to make this a little easier on myself is I'm going to solder the other side of that resistor as well. And then I'm going to snip them. You'll see why here in a second. So there's the other side of this first resistor up here. Here's the next one, which is right here. Next resistor is right there. Next resistor is right here. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip those ends of the resistor off. So that one's gone. That one's gone. That one. Okay, now here's why I did that. Because if I look at my diagram, I can take the leg of the transistor. So let's just say this one right here, this top one. I can bend it over to make it touch that resistor. So I'm going to bend it over, cut it to length, and then just tack it so that this leg is connected to this end of the resistor. And I'm going to do that for each one of these. I'm going to bend that middle transistor leg over. So right here, you can see if you can see it. You can see the transistor, each of the legs. So this middle one here is the one that I'm going to bend down, and I'm going to just have it soldered for right there, which means that I'm going to clip it right here. Okay, so that one will go like that, and then I'm going to do the same thing for this next leg. This one is going to, Oh, I must have cut off the wrong because I still have a resistor right there. So, and let me get it there. All right, so then this one, same thing. That's going to bend down. I'm going to cut that to length. Okay, so see what I have? I got transistor base going to that resistor. Next transistor base going to this resistor. This transistor base, I need to then have it go to this next resistor, and I'm going to cut it. Okay, and then lastly, this transistor leg, I want to bend that over and have it touch that last resistor. Okay, and snip it. Okay. All right, so now it should be just like in the diagram. I have this connected to here, base to this resistor, base to this resistor, base to this resistor, just like in the picture. Base to this resistor, base to this resistor, base to this resistor, base to this resistor. Okay. All right, so go ahead and do the soldering on that. Don't need a lot. We're just kind of tacking it there. My soldering iron tip must be a little dirty. Get it wiped off. Okay, 1 down, 3 to go. Okay. Let's see if I can get this focused, and you'll be able to see my solder connections that I did. So this one, I tacked the end right there, tacked it right there, tacked that to there, and tacked that to there. Do now is connect these jumper wires that need to go from each end of the resistors that are in there to their corresponding ports. So we're going to be using ports A0, A1, A2, and A3. Okay, we're going to use this one for A0. It'll go to A0. This one's going to go to A1. This one to A2. This one to A3. And you're going to just need some jumper wires for that. And we're using this 30 gauge wire here. Now for stripping it, if you're fortunate enough to have one of these that can strip 30 gauge wire, that's going to be your best bet. Now we don't need to strip a lot. We just need a tiny little bit so that we can tack solder it onto the top of whichever pad that we're soldering to. Okay. So if you do have one of these are nice. You just need to put it into the corresponding hole and push away, and it's a tiny little bit that we stripped off there. If you don't have one of those and you're using the wire cutters, you're going to need to just probably practice a second. You just barely pinch it on there and then pull straight away. If you pinch too much, you're going to nick that wire. I'm just doing it lightly, and you saw I was not actually stripping it because I wasn't squeezing hard enough. That just kind of shows how little pressure I'm actually putting on it when I'm stripping it. So just squeeze down just till you feel it hit the insulation and then pull away. Once you have the ends of the wire stripped, then we'll solder them in. Just make sure though that when you're stripping that you don't nick the wire, because if you put any nicks in it, if that wire bends a few times, it's going to break on you. So you just got to do it really lightly. In fact, this stuff might even be able to be stripped just by putting your thumbnail, digging your thumbnail into where you want it stripped and pulling away. And you could even give that a crack too if you'd like to try that. But it doesn't take much, so don't squeeze hard if you're using one of these. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get these then soldered into place. And you want to cut these relatively close to the size that they need to be, but if they're a little bit longer, that's fine. It's nice to be able to move them around a little bit. Okay, to start then, we want to get solder on the pads that are A0, A1, A2, and 3. So I'm going to add solder to those pads first. Okay, so let's get those on. You can see I must have done something on this board a little bit before prior because it already has a little solder there, but we'll add some. Just get a tiny little bubble there. Make sure that your soldering iron tip is staying clean by wiping it. I'm going to move these papers and let's tack these into place. So the first one, find my short wire. Okay. All right then. So the first one that we're going to do is the one that's A0. So we're going to go from A0 here to the A0 right there. Or I should say from this end of the resistor. So I'm just going to lay it on, heat it up. And that end is good. And the other end's going to go right here. All right, that's good. Then we'll do the next one. I'm going to go to the next one down. It's going to be A1 to A1. Then right here is going to go to A2. This one's going to go to A3. So just having a tiny little bit of wire stripped is key. You don't want too much, otherwise you could end up having solder that starts to cover other pads. So just strip what you need on the wire and make sure that your soldering iron tip is clean. Oh. All right. Now you can see I was having a little bit of difficulty getting that soldered in there. I'm just going to add a touch more solder, go with a clean tip. And my tip probably could stand to get cleaned a little bit here. Okay, that worked. And then the last one. I'm going to put a touch of solder on there. Okay, and there you have it.